Everyone knows the Maya, mysterious civilization, pyramids, the end of the world calendar, human sacrifice. Here is what nobody talks about. The Maya built the most advanced civilization in the Americas. Then they abandoned it. Not because of invasion, not because of a volcano, not because of disease. They just left. Entire cities, millions of people, gone. And nobody knows exactly why. That is the real mystery of the Maya. And that is exactly what we are going to find out. Before we get to the mystery, we need to understand who we are actually talking about. Because the first thing most people get wrong about the Maya is the most basic thing possible. The Maya were not one people. They were never one people. The Maya is a modern umbrella term for a group of related but distinct nations spread across Central America. Different languages, different histories, different traditions, different cities that often spent centuries at war with each other. Saying the Maya, as if it describes a single unified civilization, is roughly like saying the Europeans. Technically accurate as a geographic description, completely misleading as a cultural one. Today, roughly 6 million people belong to various Maya groups. In the ancient world, at the height of their civilization, there were perhaps 10 million. But even then, they were divided into dozens of separate city-states that shared certain cultural traditions, the way medieval European kingdoms shared Christianity, as a common framework within which they competed, fought, traded, and occasionally destroyed each other. So where did they come from? The ancestors of the Maya arrived in Central America roughly 5,000 years ago. Before that, their distant ancestors had come from Siberia, crossing into North America over a land bridge that existed where the Bering Strait is now. That bridge sank when the last ice age ended and sea levels rose. The people who had crossed it were stranded on a new continent. They spread south over thousands of years. Eventually, some of them ended up in what is now Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize. And here is where things get interesting. Because the Maya did not develop in the easiest environment, they developed in one of the harder ones. The Maya territories had three main zones. The northern zone was the Yucatan Peninsula. Flat, hot, almost no rivers, no lakes that did not dry up in summer. The only reliable water source was the cenotes, enormous natural sinkholes that dropped straight down through the limestone bedrock into underground rivers below. The southern zone was volcanic highlands and Pacific coastline. Dramatic landscape, difficult terrain, hard to build on, hard to defend. The central zone, what is now northern Guatemala and Belize, was different. Fertile soil fed by rivers running down from the highlands. Dense jungle providing timber and game. A climate warm enough to grow crops year-round. This is where the Maya civilization actually emerged. And it emerged slowly. Much more slowly than civilizations in the Mediterranean. And the reason for that slowness was not stupidity. It was resources. The civilizations of the ancient Middle East had wheat and barley, grains that produced reliable harvests year after year. They had cattle, horses, donkeys, animals that could pull plows, carry loads, and dramatically multiply the productive capacity of human labor. The Maya had none of that. No wheat, no barley, no horses, no cattle, no oxen. What they had was maize. Maize is not a naturally occurring plant. It is entirely a human creation, the product of thousands of years of selective breeding from a wild grass called teosinte that produced 1 or 2 kernels per stalk. The enormous ears of corn that feed the world today were developed grain by grain over millennia by indigenous farmers in Mexico. It was one of the greatest agricultural achievements in human history. But it was also more labor-intensive than wheat, more vulnerable to drought, more dependent on careful cultivation. And without animals to pull plows, the Maya had to do everything by hand. Every field cleared by hand, every crop planted by hand, every harvest gathered by hand, every load carried on human backs because there were no horses to carry them and no wheels to roll them, because there were no horses to pull wheeled vehicles and therefore no reason to invent wheels in the first place. The wheel is a solution to a specific problem, the problem of moving heavy things efficiently with animal power. Remove the animal power and the wheel becomes considerably less useful. The Maya knew about wheels. Toy wheels have been found in Maya archaeological sites. They understood the concept. They just did not need it the way civilizations with horses did. So they built their civilization without it, which makes what they actually built considerably more impressive. The Maya built pyramids without iron tools, without wheels, without draft animals, without cranes or pulleys or any of the mechanical advantages that ancient Mediterranean civilizations used to move stone. Just human labor, human organization, human ingenuity applied to the problem of stacking enormous blocks of limestone in precise geometric shapes that have stood for over 1,000 years. The largest Maya pyramid, La Danta in Guatemala, stands 72 meters tall. By total volume, it is one of the largest pyramids on Earth, larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza if you measure the entire structure, including its base platform. Built by people who had never seen a horse. But the pyramids are not the most impressive thing the Maya built. The most impressive thing was invisible. The Maya built one of the most sophisticated astronomical and mathematical systems in human history, without telescopes, without computers, with nothing but naked eye observation accumulated over centuries, and a mathematical framework so precise that modern astronomers still find it remarkable. They tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, Venus. They calculated the length of the solar year to within a fraction of a second. They predicted solar and lunar eclipses with accuracy that was not matched in Europe until centuries later. Their calendar system was not one calendar, but several running simultaneously. A solar calendar of 365 days, a ritual calendar of 260 days, a long count calendar tracking cycles of thousands of years. Which brings us to the end of the world. In 2012, the Maya long count calendar completed a cycle roughly equivalent to 5,125 years. Various esoteric writers in the 1970s decided that this meant the Maya had predicted the apocalypse. They had not. For the Maya, the end of a calendar cycle was an astronomical event, significant, ceremonially important, something to mark and observe, not the end of everything. It was like expecting the world to end because an odometer rolled over to all zeros. The Maya would have found the whole panic genuinely baffling. Now, all of this astronomical knowledge, all of this mathematical sophistication was recorded in writing. The Maya were one of the very few civilizations in human history to independently invent a complete writing system. Not an alphabet, a syllabic script where each symbol represented a sound, or a combination of sounds that could be combined to write any word in the language. They wrote on stone, on pottery, on bark paper folded into books called codices. They wrote obsessively. Every building dated, every ruler commemorated, every victory recorded, every astronomical observation noted. There was only one problem. For 400 years after Europeans arrived, nobody could read any of it. The Spanish conquest destroyed most of the written records, deliberately. A Franciscan friar named Diego de Landa burned virtually the entire Maya library in 1562. Thousands of books, centuries of accumulated knowledge, gone in an afternoon. De Landa also attempted to document the Maya writing system. He produced a list of symbols with their phonetic values, his attempt to create an alphabet for a language that did not work like an alphabet. The result was partially correct and completely useless for reading actual texts. For 4 centuries, scholars stared at Maya inscriptions and could not decode them. They could identify numbers, they could read dates, but the actual content of the writing, the histories, the stories, the names, the events, remained locked. Until 1952, in Moscow, a Soviet scholar named Yuri Konorizov, who had never visited Mexico and never would visit Mexico during his most productive years, sat down with De Landa's flawed alphabet and figured out what De Landa had gotten wrong. De Landa had assumed Maya glyphs were letters, each symbol representing a single sound. They were not letters. They were syllables. That one insight, combined with years of painstaking comparative analysis, cracked the code. Konorizov published his findings. The Western academic establishment initially rejected them. A Soviet scholar who had never been to the Maya heartland could not possibly understand the script better than American and European archaeologists who had spent careers in the field. He understood it better. When he provided his decipherment tables, there was nothing left to argue about. The Maya script could be read. And when scholars finally read what was written, they discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about who the Maya were. The Maya believed that the gods were hungry. Not just hungry for worship or prayer or offerings of grain and incense the way most religions work, literally hungry for blood. The most sacred ritual in Maya culture was the letting of blood. And the most sacred blood was the blood of nobility, the blood of rulers, the blood of the divine. A Maya king did not just rule from a throne and give orders from a palace. A Maya king proved his divinity through ritual bloodletting. The process was elaborate and, by any modern standard, horrifying. The priest or the king would use a sharp obsidian blade. Obsidian was basically the only sharp material available, and it was sharp enough to make surgical instruments seem dull, and pierce his own tongue or ears or the sensitive skin of his genitals. Blood would pour out. The king would catch it on strips of bark paper. The blood-soaked paper would then be burned. As the blood burned, it was believed to rise into the heavens as a gift to the gods. Communication with the divine accomplished through the pain and blood of the ruler himself. This was not a rare ceremonial practice reserved for once-in-a-lifetime events. Kings did this regularly, probably multiple times per year, for important dates, for important decisions, for communication with ancestors. There are carvings showing rulers with blood streaming from their pierced bodies. Some of them may have cut so much that they entered a state of shock or blood loss hallucination, a state that was considered especially valuable because it was believed to allow direct contact with the spirit world. The nobility did this too. Bloodletting was a sign of status, a sign of religious devotion, a sign of participation in divine mysteries that the common people were not privy to. Now, beyond the bloodletting that rulers did to themselves, there was another layer of sacrifice. Military captives were sacrificed to the gods. A warrior captured in battle would be brought before an altar. The priest would use an obsidian blade to cut open the chest and remove the still beating heart as an offering to the gods. What happened to the body after that varied. Sometimes it was rolled down temple steps. Sometimes it was dismembered. Sometimes it was flayed, and the priest would wear the skin as a sacred garment. In the late Maya period, influenced by contact with the Aztecs, who were masters of industrial-scale human sacrifice, the practice became more elaborate and more frequent. But here is something important. The popular image of the Maya as blood-crazed killers on the scale of the Aztecs is not accurate. The Aztecs. When they controlled an empire, they demanded tribute in the form of sacrificial victims, thousands upon thousands. So many that whole conquered nations were essentially turned into human farms, producing captives for the altars. The Maya never achieved that scale. Maya sacrifice was frequent, ritualized, central to their religious worldview, but it was not the systematic, mechanized slaughter that characterized Aztec religion at its peak. There is another famous aspect of Maya culture that everyone gets wrong: the ball game, Tlachtli. The Mesoamerican ball game, played in a specially constructed court with stone walls and a central ring through which the ball had to pass. In popular culture, it is described as a sport where the losing team was sacrificed. The champions walked away victorious, while their opponents were led to the altar. This image is almost entirely invented. There is very little evidence that losing at ball resulted in sacrifice, at least not as a standard rule. What we actually know is this: the ball game was serious business. The ball was made of solid rubber weighing up to 100 kilograms. The ball was airborne and moving fast. Players wore protective gear, including heavy padding on the hips and thighs, because being hit by that ball would cause serious injury. The game itself was not like basketball or football. There was no goal in the sense of putting the ball in a hoop and scoring. The objective was to keep the ball in motion, to pass it, to return it. The ball represented the sun, and the sun must never stop moving. Games could be played 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, sometimes larger group matches. The court had walls that the ball could bounce off of. Players used their hips, shoulders, and thighs to hit the ball. Using your hands was not allowed. It was genuinely dangerous. Players died in these games, not through ritual sacrifice, but through actual accidents. A ball moving at high speed, hitting someone in the wrong place, could cause internal injuries or crush bones. The Spaniards who witnessed the game were horrified and fascinated in equal measure. They saw skill and athleticism they had never encountered before. They also saw ritual significance they could not fully understand. And so they invented stories about sacrifice and death, stories that have persisted for 500 years. The truth is simpler and, in some ways, more interesting. It was a brutal sport, played with absolute seriousness by people who understood it as a cosmic event. The movement of the ball was the movement of celestial bodies.
Command the wind.
Playing the game meant participating in the maintenance of the universe itself. That is its own kind of sacred. The Maya believed that the gods were hungry, not just hungry for worship or prayer or offerings of grain and incense the way most religions work, literally hungry for blood. The most sacred ritual in Maya culture was the letting of blood, and the most sacred blood was the blood of nobility, the blood of rulers, the blood of the divine. A Maya king did not just rule from a throne and give orders from a palace. A Maya king proved his divinity through ritual bloodletting. The process was elaborate and, by any modern standard, horrifying. The priest, or the king, would use a sharp obsidian blade. Obsidian was basically the only sharp material available, and it was sharp enough to make surgical instruments seem dull, and pierce his own tongue or ears, or the sensitive skin of his genitals. Blood would pour out. The king would catch it on strips of bark paper. The blood-soaked paper would then be burned. As the blood burned, it was believed to rise into the heavens as a gift to the gods. Communication with the divine accomplished through the pain and blood of the ruler himself. This was not a rare ceremonial practice reserved for once-in-a-lifetime events. Kings did this regularly, probably multiple times per year, for important dates, for important decisions, for communication with ancestors. There are carvings showing rulers with blood streaming from their pierced bodies. Some of them may have cut so much that they entered a state of shock or blood loss hallucination, a state that was considered especially valuable because it was believed to allow direct contact with the spirit world. The nobility did this too. Bloodletting was a sign of status, a sign of religious devotion, a sign of participation in divine mysteries that the common people were not privy to. Now, beyond the bloodletting that rulers did to themselves, there was another layer of sacrifice. Military captives were sacrificed to the gods. A warrior captured in battle would be brought before an altar. The priest would use an obsidian blade to cut open the chest and remove the still beating heart as an offering to the gods. What happened to the body after that varied. Sometimes it was rolled down temple steps. Sometimes it was dismembered.
Join us.
Sometimes it was flayed, and the priest would wear the skin as a sacred garment. In the late Maya period, influenced by contact with the Aztecs, who were masters of industrial-scale human sacrifice, the practice became more elaborate and more frequent. But here is something important. The popular image of the Maya as blood-crazed killers on the scale of the Aztecs is not accurate. The Aztecs. When they controlled an empire, they demanded tribute in the form of sacrificial victims, thousands upon thousands. So many that whole conquered nations were essentially turned into human farms, producing captives for the altars. The Maya never achieved that scale. Maya sacrifice was frequent, ritualized, central to their religious worldview, but it was not the systematic, mechanized slaughter that characterized Aztec religion at its peak. There is another famous aspect of Maya culture that everyone gets wrong. The ball game, Tlachtli, the Mesoamerican ball game. Played in a specially constructed court with stone walls and a central ring through which the ball had to pass. In popular culture, it is described as a sport where the losing team was sacrificed. The champions walked away victorious, while their opponents were led to the altar. This image is almost entirely invented. There is very little evidence that losing at ball resulted in sacrifice, at least not as a standard rule. What we actually know is this: the ball game was serious business. The ball was made of solid rubber, weighing up to 100 kilograms. The ball was airborne and moving fast. Players wore protective gear, including heavy padding on the hips and thighs, because being hit by that ball would cause serious injury. The game itself was not like basketball or football. There was no goal in the sense of putting the ball in a hoop and scoring. The objective was to keep the ball in motion, to pass it, to return it. The ball represented the sun, and the sun must never stop moving. Games could be played 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, sometimes larger group matches. The court had walls that the ball could bounce off of. Players used their hips, shoulders, and thighs to hit the ball. Using your hands was not allowed. It was genuinely dangerous. Players died in these games, not through ritual sacrifice, but through actual accidents.
Get a healer.
A ball moving at high speed hitting someone in the wrong place could cause internal injuries or crush bones. The Spaniards who witnessed the game were horrified and fascinated in equal measure. They saw skill and athleticism they had never encountered before. They also saw ritual significance they could not fully understand. And so, they invented stories about sacrifice and death. Stories that have persisted for 500 years. The truth is simpler, and in some ways more interesting. It was a brutal sport, played with absolute seriousness by people who understood it as a cosmic event. The movement of the ball was the movement of celestial bodies. Playing the game meant participating in the maintenance of the universe itself. That is its own kind of sacred. By the 3rd century of our era, the Maya civilization was entering what historians call the classical period. This was not a unified empire. There was no Maya Caesar, no Maya Alexander, no single ruler controlling a vast territory with one army and one administration. Instead, there were hundreds of city-states, each with its own ruler, called an aha, which translates literally as "he who speaks loudly," which I find amusing because it suggests that a king's primary qualification was volume. These city-states ranged in size from small towns with a few thousand inhabitants to massive metropolitan areas that rivaled the largest cities of Rome or China. Tikal was the largest. By peak population, it probably had around 100,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world at that moment in history. These cities did not exist in isolation. They traded with each other. They formed alliances. They fought wars. They conducted diplomacy. The ruling class, the nobility, intermarried. Royal families from one city would marry into royal families from another, creating networks of kinship and obligation that crisscrossed the Maya world. It was not unlike medieval Europe. Kingdoms at war one decade, allied through marriage the next, unified in common culture and religion while remaining politically fragmented. Now about these wars. The popular image, promoted by early scholars who did not fully understand the texts, was that the Maya fought ritualized single combat duels, gentlemanly competitions where honor was satisfied and nobody really died. This is nonsense. The Maya fought wars, real wars, multiple battles per year, sieges, raids, destruction of cities, massacres of civilians. The texts are full of it. Once you can actually read the inscriptions, the picture becomes clear. One city would attack another, capture the ruler, execute him. Sometimes on the same day.
Sets on your reign.
Sometimes they would hold him as a prisoner for years, waiting for astronomical signs to determine the most auspicious moment for his sacrifice. They burned cities. They enslaved populations. They took tribute in goods and in people. It was brutal, and it was constant. But here is what makes it interesting. The winner of a war did not necessarily annex the territory, did not necessarily rule the defeated city directly. Instead, the victor might place a member of his own family on the throne, creating a puppet ruler loyal to the conqueror. Or he might demand tribute, goods or people, or both, and leave the local dynasty in place as long as they paid. This created complex webs of vassalage and obligation. Some cities were clearly subordinate to others. Some cities were apparently independent. Others shifted back and forth depending on current military balance. The largest and most successful city-states, like Tikal and Calakmul, maintained networks of allied or subject cities across enormous distances. Calakmul, at its height, controlled influence over an area roughly the size of modern-day Belgium. Not through direct conquest, through alliances, through dynastic marriages, through military support against enemies, through the prestige of the ruler and the power of his state. And these relationships were recorded in stone. Every inscription on every stela, every carved stone monument that cities left behind, was a statement of power and legitimacy. This ruler defeated that enemy. This ruler performed this sacred ritual. This ruler married into that dynasty. This ruler built this temple. Each inscription was propaganda. Each was a claim to power and legitimacy, aimed at both the local population and rival states watching from a distance. Now here is something that often surprises people. Women could be rulers. Not just could be, were. Several of the major cities were ruled by women at various points. Lady of Tikal, the Scarlet Snake Queen, the Wak Chanil Aha. These were not powerless figureheads or queens acting as regents for male heirs. These were rulers with full authority. They conducted warfare, they ordered construction, they performed sacred rituals, they married strategically to secure alliances. In the context of the ancient world, where most societies were rigidly patriarchal, this was genuinely progressive. The Maya did not see leadership as inherently male. They saw it as inherent to the divine kingship. A woman could be divine just as easily as a man. This is not to say that gender was irrelevant in Maya society. It clearly was not. But for the elite, at least, for the nobility, a capable woman could wield power. One of the most famous Maya rulers was a woman named Kinich Ajah, who ruled in the 7th century. She came to power through a combination of birthright and political shrewdness. During her reign, her city became one of the most powerful in the Maya world. She negotiated with rival states. She secured advantageous marriages for her children. She commissioned major building projects. She performed the religious rituals necessary to maintain cosmic order.
Rise up.
She did all of this while being a woman in a male-dominated world. And nobody seemed to find it particularly remarkable. This was a civilization at its height, complex, sophisticated, militarily powerful, culturally rich, unified in religion and tradition while divided politically into competing city-states. It would have seemed like this could go on forever. It did not. By the 9th century, something was happening. Inscriptions stopped appearing. Monuments stopped being commissioned. Cities stopped being built. One by one, city after city, the great centers of Maya civilization are abandoned. And the civilization that had lasted for over 1,000 years collapses in less than a century. Imagine you are standing in Tikal in the year 800, the greatest city in the Maya world. 100,000 people, massive pyramids, intricate carvings, thriving markets, a center of political and spiritual power. Now imagine you are standing in the same place in the year 900. The temples are silent. The markets are empty. The palaces are abandoned. The jungle is already beginning to reclaim what humans built. 1 century. That is how long it took for classical Maya civilization to disappear. Not suddenly, not all at once, but inevitably, inexorably. One city after another falling silent. The last inscription in Maya script was carved in 909. After that, nothing. No more monuments, no more records, no more evidence of the civilization that had dominated Central America for over 1,000 years. What happened? This is the real mystery of the Maya. There was no invasion, no Mongols sweeping across the landscape, no conquering empire. When the Spanish finally arrived 500 years later, the great cities had been empty for centuries, but they had not been destroyed by human conquest. There was no plague, no sudden epidemic that wiped out the population. The Maya did not vanish. They continued to exist in smaller settlements in less developed regions. There was no geological catastrophe, no massive volcano eruption, no earthquake that swallowed the cities. The collapse of classical Maya civilization was not caused by something external. It was caused by something internal. And the answer lies in understanding what happened to the land. By the year 800, the central zone of Maya civilization, northern Guatemala and Belize, was supporting a population of several million people. Let that number sink in for a moment. Several million people living in what is now mostly jungle and scattered towns, all of them dependent on agriculture. All of them dependent on the land producing food year after year. The Maya practiced slash and burn agriculture. You select a patch of forest, you cut down the trees, you burn the undergrowth. The ash enriches the soil. You plant your crops, maize, beans, chiles, for a few years. When the soil begins to lose its fertility, you move to a new patch of forest and repeat the process. This system works fine if you have enough land, enough forest to let each plot lie fallow for years while it recovers its fertility. But what if you do not have enough land? What if your population has expanded so much that you cannot afford to let fields rest? What if you have to plant and replant the same soil year after year? The soil becomes exhausted, the yields drop, the food supply becomes less reliable. In a good year, the crops produce. In a bad year, a drought year, there is not enough. Archaeological evidence suggests that around 750 CE, there was a major drought in the Maya region. It lasted roughly 200 years. 2 centuries of reduced rainfall, 2 centuries of diminished harvests, 2 centuries of slowly increasing food insecurity in a civilization that had grown dependent on reliable harvests to feed millions. At first, the elite responded by building bigger temples, by conducting more elaborate rituals, by intensifying bloodletting to appease angry gods who were causing the drought. The gods were not appeased. The drought continued. Archaeological evidence shows that toward the end of the classical period, in the 9th century, the ruling elite were beginning to suffer from malnutrition. Skeletal remains of rulers show signs of nutritional stress. If the rulers were going hungry, the common people were starving. Inscriptions from the period show an increasingly desperate tone. Rulers claiming victories that probably never happened, claiming successful rituals that apparently failed, appearing to be grasping at anything that might restore order. And then, the system simply broke. Dynasties collapsed. Some rulers died and were not replaced. Others were replaced by figures with no clear genealogical connection, suggesting that the normal rules of succession had broken down. In some cases, there is evidence of violence, of cities being sacked, of populations fleeing to the countryside or to other regions. But mostly what we see is abandonment. Cities simply emptied as the social system that sustained them fell apart. Think about what holds a city together. Not just buildings, but the system that provides food, the administrative structure, the religious authority. The sense that the ruler can maintain order and appease the gods. In classical Maya civilization, the king was the link between the human and divine realms. He conducted the rituals that maintained cosmic order. His power was based on the assumption that he could provide for his people, and that the gods would respond to his prayers. When the drought came and the crops failed and the people starved, the fundamental legitimacy of the entire system was shattered. The gods had not responded. The rituals had failed. The king could not maintain order. Why would you stay in a city ruled by a king who had failed so completely? Why would you follow his orders? Why would you contribute your labor and your resources to a system that was clearly no longer functioning? You would leave. And that is exactly what happened. The population dispersed. They moved to regions with better water access. To the north on the Yucatan Peninsula, where cenotes provided reliable water. To the south, to smaller settlements that could be sustained with less intensive agriculture. The great cities of the classical period were abandoned, some to be swallowed by the jungle, some to fall into ruin. The civilization did not die, the people did not vanish, but the system that had created the great cities and the monumental architecture and the complex political hierarchies, that system collapsed under the weight of its own unsustainability. The Maya had created a civilization so dependent on continuous growth and increased production that when growth stopped, when the land could no longer support it, the entire structure caved in. They had exhausted their resources, deforested their land, pushed their agriculture past its limits. They did this not because they were stupid or short-sighted. They did it because they lived in the system. They could not see the system from the outside. They could not step back and recognize that they were living on borrowed time, that they were harvesting more than the land could regenerate. By the time the crisis became undeniable, it was too late to reverse it. Most conquered civilizations do not survive conquest. The Romans conquered the Etruscan civilization. The Etruscans ceased to exist as a distinct people. The Persians conquered the Babylonians. Babylon became a Persian province. The English conquered the Anglo-Saxons so thoroughly that within a few centuries, Anglo-Saxon culture was absorbed into something new. The Maya were supposed to disappear in the same way. The Spanish conquest was total. The elite were killed or absorbed. The language was suppressed. The religion was replaced with Catholicism.
We seek your mercy.
The writing system was forgotten. The knowledge system was destroyed. By any standard assessment, the Maya civilization should have been erased from history. Instead, they survived. Today, approximately 6 million people identify as Maya. They live across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. They speak Maya languages. They maintain Maya cultural traditions. They remember themselves as descendants of one of the world's greatest civilizations. This is extraordinary. Not because the numbers are large, they are not compared to the population of the surrounding regions, but because they survived at all. Because despite 500 years of Spanish colonization, despite marginalization, despite poverty, despite every structural force arrayed against them, the Maya maintained a cultural identity. They remembered who they were. In the 19th century, something remarkable happened. The colonial system in Mexico and Central America was beginning to crumble. The Spanish Empire was in decline. New independent nations were being formed. And in this period of instability, the Maya of the Yucatan Peninsula rose in rebellion. They called it the Caste War. Tens of thousands of indigenous fighters took up arms against the colonial authorities. They fought for their freedom. They fought for their land. They fought against the system that had exploited them for 300 years. And they came very close to succeeding. The rebellion created an independent Maya territory in the southern Yucatan. The remaining Spanish forces were pushed north. For a brief moment, an extraordinary moment, the Maya had reclaimed political independence. But the rebellion is remembered today for something else. In the midst of the fighting, in the chaos of warfare and displacement, there emerged a spiritual leader, a man who claimed to be in contact with a divine power. He spoke of a talking cross that communicated directly with God, that had chosen the Maya people as the elect. The cross was the symbol of Christianity, the religion that had been imposed on them, but reinterpreted, given new meaning, transformed into something that belonged to the Maya and not to the Spanish. It seems impossible. It seems almost absurd. A talking cross in the jungle. Religious revival around a symbol of their former oppressors. But the Maya people believed. They united around this talking cross. They built a temple around it. They created a state called Chan Santa Cruz, centered on this religious conviction. The state lasted from the 1850s to the early 1900s. For over 50 years, the Maya maintained a functioning, independent state in the middle of the Yucatan jungle, while the surrounding world modernized and industrialized. It took the Mexican government army, with machine guns and armored trains, to finally destroy it. But the memory of Chan Santa Cruz, the memory of a moment when the Maya had their own nation again, lived on. The Maya did not disappear. They endured. They were marginalized. They were exploited. They were nearly destroyed by disease and war. But they survived. And in the late 20th century, something unexpected happened. The Maya began to reclaim their history. Scholars worked to decipher the ancient texts. The old cities were excavated. The ruins of Tikal and Chichen Itza and 100 other sites were explored and studied. The world began to understand what the Maya had accomplished, and the Maya themselves began to remember, to take pride in their heritage, to see themselves not as descendants of some vague indigenous past, but as heirs to one of the world's great civilizations. Today, there are Maya scholars studying Maya history, Maya activists working to preserve Maya languages, several of which are on the verge of extinction, Maya communities working to maintain their traditions and cultural practices. 6 million people in a region dominated by Spanish-speaking mestizo populations, in countries with histories of marginalizing indigenous peoples. And they are still here. They are still Maya. This is a story that does not fit the normal narrative of civilizational collapse and cultural extinction. It is a story of resilience, of a people who lost their great cities and their writing system and their political power, but did not lose themselves, who maintained their identity across 5 centuries of conquest and marginalization and attempted cultural erasure, who are now reclaiming and re-remembering their past. It is one of the most remarkable stories in human history, and it is not over yet. So, the Maya. Let us be honest about what we have just covered. One of the greatest civilizations in human history built themselves to death. Not through conquest, not through catastrophe, through the slow accumulation of their own success. They built cities. Millions of people lived in those cities. Those millions needed to eat. The land had to feed them, year after year, without rest. For 1,000 years, it worked. The Maya found ways to sustain a sophisticated civilization in an environment that had given them no domesticated animals, no wheeled vehicles, no draft power except human muscle. It was an extraordinary achievement. But it required constant growth, constant expansion, constant clearing of new land to replace worn-out fields. And then the growth hit a limit. The land ran out. The forests were gone. The soil was exhausted. A drought came. A drought that lasted 2 centuries. And suddenly, a system that had seemed eternal revealed itself to be fragile. The system collapsed. The cities emptied. The monuments were abandoned. The civilization that had lasted over 1,000 years ended in less than a century. This is a tragedy, but it is also a lesson, because the Maya did not disappear when their civilization fell. The people survived. They adapted. They moved to new territories where the land could support them. They rebuilt their societies on a smaller scale. They maintained their culture, their language, their identity. And they endured through 500 years of conquest and colonization and marginalization. When a system breaks, when a civilization collapses, it is tempting to think that everything is lost. The Maya teach us something different. The civilization fell, but the people remained. The great cities were abandoned, but the culture survived. The writing system was destroyed, but the memory persisted. 6 million people today identify as Maya. They speak Maya languages. They maintain Maya traditions. They remember themselves as descendants of one of history's greatest civilizations. They should not have survived. By every metric of historical probability, they should have been absorbed into the surrounding population and disappeared within a few generations. Instead, they are still here. Still Maya. And now, with the decipherment of their ancient texts, they can look back at what their ancestors built and understand it. The great cities, the sophisticated mathematics, the astronomical precision, the complex political systems, the artistic achievements. All of it is visible now. All of it can be studied and appreciated and learned from. The collapse of classical Maya civilization was not the end of the Maya story. It was an interruption, one chapter ending so that another could begin. And the remarkable thing, the thing that makes this story more than just another tale of rise and fall, is that the chapter that is happening now may be as important as anything that came before. Because the Maya are reclaiming their history.
Seals our future.
They are studying their past. They are preserving their languages. They are rebuilding connections to their cultural heritage. They are remembering who they are. Plato wrote that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The Maya remember. They remember the cities that fell. They remember the civilization that collapsed. They remember the drought that lasted 2 centuries. They remember the conquest that followed. And they use that memory not to despair,
the fire brings us together,
but to understand,
illuminating the path,
to understand what they inherited, to understand what was lost, to understand what survived. The greatest achievement of the Maya may not be the pyramids or the mathematics or the calendar system. It may be this, the fact that after everything, after collapse and conquest and 500 years of marginalization, they are still here, still Maya, still themselves. That is the real mystery of the Maya. Not how they built such a great civilization, but how they survived when it fell.